All this going down in the Rose Garden. You'll see it in a matter of minutes here. The president expected to sign the government spending bill that passed overwhelmingly in Congress yesterday after it cleared the House and Senate. Reaction now from both sides. Here is a sample of what we're picking up.
First of all, you've got to look at what the president's main objective is, and that is to keep America safe. It's not just a campaign promise. Current law, by the way, blocks the president from building wall in that area. This agreement will remove those limitations, but it's not as much as the president or I would like to see. So there are other areas the president can go.
The president is doing an end run about Congress, about the power of the purse. You've heard me say over and over again, Article 1. The legislative branch, the power of the purse, the power to declare war, many other powers listed in the Constitution, and, of course, the responsibility to have oversight. So the president is doing an end run around that.
Nancy Pelosi there. Now we have reaction across the board. Chris Wallace in Washington, Andy McCarthy with the legal analysis, but John Roberts begins this hour from the North Lawn. All right, John, where are we now? Good morning there.
Bill, good morning to you. Things just a little bit delayed in the Rose Garden. We expect that the event will start soon, and what the president is going to do is he's going to announce that he's signing the DHS appropriation bill that they received late last night, and then in addition to that, he is going to declare a national emergency. This morning, the White House laid out the pots of money that the president will be putting toward border wall construction. Let's put it up on the screen so you can follow along. First of all, there's the $1.375 billion from the DHS appropriation. In addition to that, the president has found some buckets of money elsewhere in the administration, elsewhere in the government that he can use. $600 million from the Treasury Department Forfeiture Fund. $2.5 billion from what's called the Department of Defense Section 284 Drug Interdiction Program. There will also be maybe as much as $2.2 billion reprogrammed from other areas of the Department of Defense into that Section 284 to put toward the construction of a border wall. And then this is the one that he needs the emergency declaration for. It's Section 2808, the military construction budget. The president plans to take about $3.5 to $3.6 billion from that. Now, each one of these pots of money comes with a certain amount of risk, and there is escalating risk on top of that. So the $600 million from Treasury, that's a pretty easy one as far as the White House is concerned. They can use that money for pretty much anything they want. They also believe that it will be pretty easy to get money under Section 284, the drug interdiction program, but moving some of that money around within the DOD to plus up the funding for that may catch the eye of some folks in Congress and may invite a legal challenge. And then they absolutely believe that the emergency declaration and tapping into that military construction budget will invite a legal challenge and howls of protest from members of Congress who want to see that money go to construction on military bases in their district. One thing that the White House is not going to touch, Democrats have made a big deal of this over the last few weeks, saying that the president was going to tap into disaster relief money. They are not touching a dime of disaster relief money. They do believe that they will end up in court on at least some of this. They think between the DHS appropriation and money that's free and clear, they'll probably end up with about $4.4 to $4.6 billion. They want to get the entire $8, so they are prepared to go to court to fight this, Bill. We'll hear from the president very soon.
You got it, John. Thanks. Stand by from the North Lawn. I want to bring in Chris Wallace, anchor of Fox News Sunday. And Chris, good morning to you. This is something the president's been talking about for 3 years now. From a policy perspective, how does it look today?
Well, there's no policy if he can't make it happen, and that's going to be the big question. First of all, there's going to be a fight in Congress because under the National Emergencies Act of 1976, Congress has 15 days to pass a resolution of disapproval. That will almost certainly happen, simple majority in the House. They will disapprove the president's declaring a national emergency. Then it'll go to the Senate. That's pretty interesting because the Senate, there's 53 Republicans. It only takes a simple majority. And if you add up, if all the Democrats were to vote for the resolution of disapproval, plus just the Republicans who are on the record now, and there are about 4 or 5, is saying they're very concerned about this as a potential violation of Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the power of the purse. You could get a resolution of disapproval on the president's desk. Now, the president can veto that, and there's almost no chance that the Congress would be able to override it. But this would be the first veto by the president since he took office in 2017 on a question of declaring a national emergency and, according to some members of Congress, going around the will of Congress. Then there's the whole constitutional and court issue, because you know a variety of people, whether it's House Democrats after he vetoes a resolution of disapproval, whether it's some local officials, whether it's private property owners, are going to take this into court. And as we saw with the travel ban and with the Dreamers, usually you can get a federal district court at least to say that this is unconstitutional. The president is stepping over his powers. Now, in the case of the travel ban, the Supreme Court ended up siding with him 5-4. But this could be tied up in the courts for a long period of time.
And we'll talk more to Andy McCarthy about that in just a moment. As we await the president, Chris, the reaction continues to pour in from Capitol Hill, both sides of the aisle. Democrats obviously firmly against this move or potential move. We haven't heard him announce it yet for declaring a national emergency. Republicans mainly supporting the president, but we have heard some on the right speaking out against it. Marco Rubio has put out a statement. John Cornyn has expressed his displeasure with this move by the president. Susan Collins, Rand Paul. There are some on the right who say that they don't want to see this happen.
Well, that's right. And I think there are two reasons. First of all, the constitutional issue. Article 1 of the Constitution, which specifically gives Congress the power of the purse and does not say that the president can sit there and take any money that Congress has approved and repurpose it. In fact, if he wants to repurpose even some of those amounts that John Roberts was talking about, he's supposed to go to the chairman and the ranking opposition member of the House Appropriations and Senate Appropriations Committee. So that, first of all, the president would be doing this without their approval. In the case of the House, they would certainly disapprove that. So you've got that aspect of it. And also there's the question of precedent. And Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, brought that up yesterday, said, look, someday there's going to be a Democratic president. And what happens if that Democratic president says, you know, we have a national emergency with gun violence or with climate change, that Republicans are going to howl about that. So you're exactly right. There are at least 5 Republicans who are on record, not saying they would vote for a resolution of disapproval, but saying they don't approve of what the president is doing. And if they go with the Democrats, then that will pass the Senate as well as the House.
What you're describing is a series of variables that we do not quite know how it's going to play out, Chris. Look at it from a political standpoint then. You're going to come quickly into an election season. And what would be the message from the president as to how he sells the best effort that he could possibly get out of Congress on this?
Well, look, you can be cynical and say that the president fully understands. Supposedly, the White House counsel's office said that this is to declare a national emergency a high litigation risk, which seems to be something of an understatement. Clearly, this is going to go to the courts. But you could argue that what the president figures, even if they block me from the national emergency, I get whatever money I'm able to get, at least the 1.375 that Congress has approved. And I have certainly demonstrated to my base I've done everything I could possibly do, including declaring a national emergency, going up against Congress, going into the courts to fight to keep my promise of 2016, which was to build a wall. So it certainly would play well to his base, including some members of his base who've come out and said if he signs just the bill that was approved by Congress yesterday, that would be terrible. So he can at least say to them, I've done everything I could to get the money for the wall.
I just want to get Nancy Pelosi in here ahead of the president's announcement. Here she is.
We will review our options. We'll be prepared to respond appropriately to it. I know the Republicans have some unease about it no matter what they say, because if the president can declare an emergency on something that he has created as an emergency, an illusion that he wants to convey, just think of what a president with different values can present to the American people.
President's a few minutes away from making that announcement. She's saying that he created this emergency and that this is an illusion.
Well, you know, if you look at the statistics, 4 times as many people were coming over the border in the year 2000. 1.6 million people were apprehended coming across the border in 2000. Last year, it was less than 400,000. So the argument could be, yes, there certainly is a problem, and yes, people are coming over the border, but it's only a fraction, about 25% of how many people were coming over in the year 2000. So what national emergency? Of course, the president will say it's a different group. It's a lot more families. They're coming from Central America, and under the rules, a law that was passed in 2007 or 8, I believe, they're not allowed, if they're from Central America as opposed to Mexico, to return them right away. The president will make the case that it's a national emergency, but you can be sure there'll be plenty of people on the other side who'll say it isn't.
All right, Chris Wallace, thank you.
See you Sunday, Chris.
Well, I may see you after the speech.
Hopefully.
That would be nice. All right, great. He's going to stick around. We will see you after the president's speech from the Rose Garden. Chris, thank you. We'll see you in a bit. Joining us now is Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney and a Fox News contributor. Andy, we need you to tell us what's next here if the president does indeed go ahead and declare a national emergency.
Well, as Chris said, what's next is two things, probably some action in Congress, but as well as immediately they'll be in court. And I think the interesting thing about the resolution of disapproval that Chris was just describing is when the National Emergencies Act was passed in 1976, the idea was not that Congress would do this resolution and then it would go back to the president to determine whether to veto it or not. It was actually initially passed as a legislative veto. That is, the president wasn't supposed to have this unchecked power. The legislature, the Congress, kept for itself the ability to basically cancel the national emergency if the president declared it. Now, the Supreme Court, in an unrelated matter a few years later, invalidated the legislative veto as a matter of constitutional law. But I do think a court looking at this would say, number one, when Congress gave the president this power, it intended for there to be a check. And if the Congress were to come back and do the resolution of disapproval, even if the president were to veto it, I think that would be a very powerful element that the court would evaluate in deciding whether to uphold what the president has done or not.
And here's what we're getting from the White House. John Roberts and others working on this. Number 5, guys, the breakdown of possible wall funding sources. About, $600 million from the Treasury Department's drug forfeiture program. $2.5 billion Defense Department, $2.2 billion reprogram from DOD, $3.5 billion Defense Department's military construction budget. If you look at that, some of that money, Andy, is considered easy money, as they say in Washington. I know this might blow some people's minds, but some of this has already been budgeted and it's out there. Some of this is a little more difficult to get to, but if you look at John Roberts' reporting here, if the president wanted $5.7 billion for construction of border security in the Southwest, the easy money could total up to $4.5 billion. That gets you very close. And he could frame it that way while the remainder of the funds remain locked up in litigation. There's a lot right now that you could access, apparently, according to our reporting so far, Andy.
Yeah, you know, when John was going through that bill, the thing that occurred to me was I was thinking about when President Obama, as part of the Iran deal, made the payment to Iran that resulted in the release of the hostages. And I can't remember how many, I think it was $2 or $3 billion were involved, but they managed to find it. I think there was the Judgment Fund, which is kind of a slush fund of money that is available for various things that they're able to tap. And it just occurred to me as he was running through these different pots of money that you just talked about, how much easier it is to do this when you go about it quietly. And I think part of the reason that President Trump is going to have much more trouble accessing what would otherwise be easy money is the fact that he's so raised the attention of everybody to this with respect to the wall and the funding for it, that every penny is going to be looked at here in a more exacting way than it might be if you went about this a little bit more quietly.
Hey, Andy, I want to run this by you because some of the lawmakers have put out statements about where they stand on the president taking this action. Marco Rubio said this: "We've got a crisis at our southern border," he agrees, "but no crisis justifies violating the Constitution. Today's national emergency is border security, but a future president may use this exact same tactic to impose the Green New Deal. I will wait to see what statutory or constitutional power the president relies on to justify such a declaration. conversation before making any definitive statement. But I am skeptical it will be something I can support. So he's obviously talking about the precedent that this sets. But that last, second to last sentence kind of stuck with me. I'll wait to see what statutory or constitutional power the president relies on to justify this. So what will you be looking for specifically from the president here in the wording of his statement when he begins a few moments from now?
Yeah, well, I think Senator Rubio is right about that. In fact, I was pleased, although not terribly convinced as I was waiting to come on. You know, any day that you can hear Nancy Pelosi sound like James Madison is a good day, right? So they're all worried about the Constitution today, and they're all worried about the precedent. I think Rubio is correct to say, look, here's the problem. The president really shouldn't have this power. This is legislative authority that he's really executing in nature here. But let's wait to see exactly what he does and what the precedent is for how the courts have handled the different provisions that he may try to access in order to gather this money together. So I think as a matter of general principle, the president shouldn't be allowed to legislate. And I don't think the president, other than in dire emergencies like an attack or a natural catastrophe, the president shouldn't have this ability to just declare an emergency and start to legislate and move money around. That's really what Congress is supposed to do in the system. But when you ultimately make a decision and you're dealing with a concrete set of facts, you have to look at exactly what statutes the president relies on and what the precedents are in interpreting those statutes.
Andy, hang on with us, okay, for the next hour or so.
Sure.
What I hear you saying is that you can characterize this as a split decision. Fair?
Well, I guess so. But again, you know, we have to see exactly what he does and how. I think this is really, Bill, we've been talking about this for weeks. I think he's kicking this to the court, and everybody's going to retreat to their corner with their political issue, right? The Democrats are going to be able to tell their base they stopped him.
Some of the funding
He's
for the
going to be able
border
to tell
will
his
go,
that he tried as hard as he could.
Some of the funding for the border will go forward, so you can make the case that you're getting a more fortified border as you work your way through the courts. That's how you can characterize it as a split decision. So we'll see if that's what we get. Andy, hang on, okay? Andy McCarthy with us for the next hour or so as we wait on the Rose Garden sale.
He will stand by. Meanwhile, President Trump taking action. He is expected to announce his plans to protect the American people any minute live from the Rose Garden. We're going to take you there as soon as he begins speaking.
Also in a moment here, the self-proclaimed socialist Ocasio-Cortez applauding the decision by Amazon to ditch New York City. They are out, at least for now, and now members of her own party are firing back. Charles Payne is going to take us through this hot story coming up, too, shortly.
I was flabbergasted. I said, you know, why on earth, after all the effort that we all have put in, would you simply walk away?
Reaction has been pouring in from Capitol Hill throughout the night and all morning. Democrats, obviously, and we had a member of the DNC on earlier who said that they are united in their fight against this upcoming announcement by the president to declare a national emergency to secure the funding to build that wall. Republicans support him mostly. Some have spoken out against this move by the president. Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Susan Collins among them. But the reaction continues to pour in and likely will as soon as the president makes this announcement.
Fox News' John Roberts reporting for the White House about an hour ago. Senior administration official telling him the president will move $8 billion in currently appropriated or what is considered available funds toward construction of the wall. That includes a lot of money from a lot of different areas, $600 million Treasury Department, millions, if not billions, from the Department of Defense. And then there will be, we expect, some sort of court battle, and we'll see how Congress reacts as well. But there are a lot of variables in play after the president makes his decision. But given the move on behalf of the spending bill yesterday in Congress that overwhelmingly passed the Senate and in the House after a 35-day shutdown that started more than a month ago, it has come to today.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi objecting to this upcoming announcement by the president, saying that if the president can declare an emergency on something that he has created as an emergency, an illusion that he wants to convey, just think of what a president with different values can present to the American people. That's her voice this morning. John Roberts is live at the White House. As this announcement's gotten a little bit delayed since the top of the hour, John, but is likely to happen soon.
Yeah, Sandra, we did get a 2-minute warning about 3.5 minutes ago. 2-minute warnings here in Washington tend to be more of a suggestion than anything, but we do expect the president will be coming out very soon. He will announce that he has signed the bill. I don't see a table up there, so he's not going to actually sign it in front of us. And then he will declare a national emergency. Now, in terms of the money that Bill was talking about a second ago, there's only a certain portion of it that requires the declaration of a national emergency for him to tap into, and that is the military construction budget, the so-called Section 2808 portion of this money, and that's about $3.6 billion. They also plan on taking some money that's been seized from bad guys, drug lords among them, which is in the Treasury Department forfeiture program. That totals $601 million. And then through the Section 284 program, which is drug interdiction run by the Department of Defense, between the money that's currently in the program and some other money that will be reprogrammed, about $2.2 billion worth, they should get to a total of $2.5 billion. The president will be coming out in just a second. What you're seeing here, I believe, behind me is some of the angel moms that this White House has highlighted many times, people who have had loved ones killed by illegal immigrants. But back to the money again. The president and the White House believe that the money from the Treasury Department won't invite much of a challenge, if any, at all. They think that's pretty easy money. The money that's currently in the 284 program, they'll also get pretty easily, they believe. Then as they start to move money around, it gets a little bit dicier, and they do believe that tapping into the military construction budget, though the White House is telling us that none of the money that they have earmarked is for critical infrastructure construction projects, and that would be much more tailored toward a wall, that will likely invite a court challenge. But the White House has lawyered this thing in and out over weeks, if not months, and they believe, Sandra, that they have got a very strong stance to make should they go into court. And you can bet that they probably will be taken into court in California within the jurisdiction of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which up until last week, when they got a favorable ruling, really has been unfavorable to the president. Sandra?
You know, John, a moment ago we saw William Barr just in the screen there. He was confirmed the next
He's right behind me.
Yeah, next Attorney General just yesterday. We were talking to Chris Wallace and Andy McCarthy a moment ago about this resolution of disapproval that could pass in Congress, and the president could ultimately override it. But there are some Republicans who are going to disagree with the move. I don't know how strong that opposition is, but from your sources at the White House and in talking with those in the West Wing, how do they characterize today as a victory, which is what is anticipated from this announcement?
I'm sorry, Bill, can you say that one more time? Your volume's just a little louder.
How do they characterize this as a victory, which is what is anticipated here?
How do they characterize the $1.37 billion as a victory?
Or the border security and the immigration fight itself. How will they frame that, John?
Now I got you. Well, clearly, the argument that they're using is we are now in an era of divided government. You've got the Democrats that are controlling the House of Representatives. You've got Republicans who are controlling the Senate. And in divided government, you cannot get everything that you are looking for. The president is highlighting as a victory the fact that he got $23 billion in overall border security, though he didn't get what he wanted for the wall. There are also some restrictions within the bill, such as where they can and cannot build wall. The National Butterfly Center, just west of McAllen, Texas, for example, that they can't characterize as a win. They also need to engage in extensive negotiations with local officials in 5 different areas in Texas, right on the border there. They can't characterize that as a victory, though ultimately DHS will be able to build a wall. But I think, Bill, what they say is we're in an era of divided government. We got what we could. We're trying to backfill that as much as we can with this other money, and let's fight this battle in the 2020 election and try to change things around.
At this point, it's anybody's guess how strong the opposition to this declaration will be when it comes to the House and the Senate. John, we've gotten the 2-minute warning here. We're waiting on the president. There seems to be
that was 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, and we await the president here. What about the reaction that we have had so far? There's been a lot of it from Capitol Hill overnight and into the morning, John.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly Democrats don't like the idea that the president is going to declare an emergency one bit, and organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union and others are already sharpening their pencils and preparing for the court challenge the moment that the president comes up here and announces that he is declaring a national emergency. There are some Republicans who don't believe that the president, at least that the president did not win in terms of getting the money that he wanted for a border wall. The president believes that Republicans didn't negotiate hard enough. But, I mean, it continues this fight. And what you're going to see today really is aimed at the president's base, to say that he is doing everything that he possibly can to make good on his central campaign promise. Now, don't forget, he's not going to get all of this money all at once. The money from the forfeiture, he will get very soon. The money from the 284 program, he'll get very soon. But the money from the military construction budget, that's going to take a long time. But they needed to request all of this money now because it all needs to be authorized in the current fiscal year, which ends on September the 30th. And then when we hit September 30th, they can start this process all over again. So this could be just the very beginning of the president's battle royale with Congress over moving money around within the government to fund his border wall.
John, I would believe with the shot we have here, I think that's Mick Mulvaney in the West Wing, in the Oval Office, I should say there. The measure does include a lot of things that Democrats like, frankly. You think about the measure for improved surveillance equipment, more customs agents, humanitarian aid for detained immigrants. There's a lot in it that they can say, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that bill that the Democrats can say, look, we didn't give the president what he was looking for. But the president agrees with Democrats that you need more technology. You need to harden up screenings at ports of entry, which is why I think $700 million was allocated for non-invasive screening equipment. But he says it only works if you have the border barrier, which is why he's digging in his heels here, and he is demanding money for a border wall. And if he can't get the money from Congress, he's going to get it some other way. You'll notice, too, all throughout this bill, and I've talked to a couple of administration officials, there are little handcuffs that are put on much of the appropriation to say it can't be used for this, it can't be used for that, no money shall be used for this, no money used for that. And I don't know if it's an inordinate number compared to other appropriation bills, but we can tell you that more than 350 times in the bill there are specific instructions that money cannot be moved from this to some other program, which is now, again, why the president is going for this money outside of the DHS appropriation.
All right, John Roberts, we await the president at the White House.
We're still waiting.
We are still waiting. He should step out at any moment now. Andy McCarthy, you're standing by. If you could just weigh in on the moment as we await the president.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that I'd be interested in how a court will take is the kind of cognitive dissonance that's involved in both signing the emergency declaration and signing the spending bill, which actually has provisions in it that cut away from our ability to deal with certain aspects of illegal immigration. I think it's very tough for the president to say, on the one hand, I had to do this because it was an emergency, and on the other hand, sign a piece of legislation that not only gives him a lot less funding than he wanted, but actually cuts down on our ability to detain people who are illegally in the country and actually gives some immunity to people who are in the country illegally who might be in a position to sponsor the incoming family members, particularly the minors, who are a large part of the reason why we have the crisis the president is citing in the first place.
Andy, can you take us through the law here? Help us understand this. Presently, there are 30 national emergencies in effect. That's of the 1st of February, 2019. One of which goes back to November 14th, 1979, on behalf of President Jimmy Carter, that blocked Iranian government property. And you go through this list, and it's through President Clinton and Presidents Bush, and it deals with Sudan, it deals with the Balkans, it deals with Zimbabwe. And there's so many more here. Burundi, Republic of Congo. So what's the big deal in declaring a national emergency when you have so many of these that are still in effect today? Just give us the distinction for how we should understand what the beef is this time.
Well, the beef this time is political. What you're citing is a big problem that we have in the structure of our government and in constitutional law. You know, the two problems that you have, Bill, are, number one, Congress is very good at declaring emergencies or finding the situations that they think rise to the level of emergencies. They're not really good at saying, okay, that's over now, so let's go back to normal legislation. So you have the law really littered with these emergencies that may have been emergent at the time, but certainly aren't, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And then the other problem that you have is a problem that really it comes up in various iterations throughout the government, which is that Congress is very happy to delegate its authority to legislate to whether it's the president or the federal bureaucracies, in some instances to kick difficult issues to the courts and let them resolve it. These are all things that Congress itself, what we elect them for is to actually wrestle with these things and make decisions. And what you find again and again and again are these means by which they kick their own responsibilities to different components
you're
of the
talking
government.
about spending and appropriations. That's the rub here, the beef, as we say. Andy, stand by on that, okay? Andy McCarthy there.
Thank you, Andy. Meanwhile, we want to bring in our A-team to America's Newsroom. Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five, joins us. Cheryl Casoni, co-host of FBN AM on the Fox Business Network. And Matt Gorman, former communications director for the National Republican Congressional Committee. It's anybody's guess when the president steps out here to deliver this address. We do know that the White House has confirmed, Matt, to you first, that he intends to sign this massive border deal that was passed by Congress and declare a national emergency. Your thoughts as we await the president here?
Well, I think in the short term, it's going to get messy, and in the long term, it could be a bit scary. And in the short term, look, it's going to get challenged by the courts. Democrats are going to force a resolution of disapproving of this. It's going to make its way to the Senate, divide the Republicans. Some of them have tough reelects. That could be a problem for them. But in the long term, it's going to be scary. I think Nancy Pelosi already alluded to the fact that a Democratic president could use this on guns, Green New Deal, Medicare for all. So I think in the long term, that could be a bad proposition for Republicans.
So to be sure, so you're saying scary because of the precedent that it sets?
Yes, scary because of the precedent.
Yeah. All right. Another 2-minute warning now, so we await the president here. Cheryl, your thoughts. You've been on the Fox Business Network throughout the morning, obviously talking about the money angle of all of this and digging into the numbers here.
Sure. I mean, $8 billion, but how that money is going to be spent is certainly something that investors are going to want to see. But, honestly, from a market standpoint, a lot of this has been kind of noise. The good news is a shutdown was averted, and the markets certainly are celebrating that. We need to get more news out of the U.S.-China trade deal, and that's going to pick up next week in Washington. But at the end of the day, is this taxpayer money going to be spent correctly? Is it going to go to border cities where you get the most inflow of immigrants? What does this mean for the healthcare system? You've got ERs and hospitals that are overrun with illegal immigrants, whether it's in the Rio Grande Valley or in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, and Tucson. All of these are kind of the broader sidebar issues that investors look for when you look about the fact that you've got an $8 billion potential barrier being put up between the U.S. and Mexico. Will it save us money long term? That's a question for everybody.
Juan, what is your guess about Chapter 2 in this today, about what happens next?
Well, hopefully it comes out. I think this is like an NBA game, last 2 minutes. Boy, it goes on for a while. I think that the next step, obviously, is that you're going to, one, have the challenges on a legal basis to this act. You were talking earlier, Bill, about the fact that we have 30 existing national emergencies, but we've never had one involving appropriations. Not one is about the president taking the spending powers that are authorized for Congress away from the Congress, and that's what makes this very different. In addition, I think the big news here politically is something Matt was talking about, that if you have a resolution of disapproval, that you're going to split Republicans. And so you're going to get people who are trying, like Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, to support the president. Yesterday, Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, repeated calls to the president. He thought he had a deal with the president in which it would be limited to signing this bipartisan deal without the emergency. Then he calls back, and it's times have changed. The president's temper has changed. And so you get this deal. But for the members of the Republican members of the Senate in specific, they were feeling, look, we got the president to sign the border deal. We can move from there. We'll deal with the emergency later. It's almost as if the president had a tantrum and fellow Republicans feel they're just coping with him at this moment.
Well, Juan, did Democrats do enough to work with the president on this?
Oh, my gosh. I don't think there was much doubt that Republicans felt that, one, they had a deal in December. In fact, the deal they had in December, Sandra, had more money for barriers, fencing, whatever you want to call it, than what they've got now. And then secondly, Democrats felt that they had given up, especially with regard to the number of beds available to ICE for detention, that they had given money for 55 miles of barrier fencing.
Let's hear from Matt respond to that.
Well, look, I think this was the best deal they're going to get the time. Let's remember, Nancy Pelosi said, I'm not going to give you $1 for the wall. That's certainly not true right now. They said they wanted to cap the number of beds, tie the hands of ICE. Certainly that didn't come to fruition. So look, I think this is the best deal they're going to get right now. And look, this could happen. This is only going to last to September. We can talk and see how this plays out at the border then. We might need to make a change then.
Cheryl, in a moment here, we'll find out what he has to say, clearly. And then all these variables that we've been talking about for the past 2 hours are going to play out in their own time. What is your suggestion when you listen to John Roberts suggesting that you could go ahead and get a lot of this money right now, which means the process goes forward while some of it could be delayed for 2 years.
And that is the noise I was referencing earlier, is that you're going to see, we've already heard Nancy Pelosi say they are looking at a challenge. This could end up in the courts. That prolongs the issue, and this could be kind of, again, a speed bump. Markets watch that, but again, that's kind of the sidebar, the noise that I was talking about earlier. As far as the spending itself, I'm from Texas and Arizona. I grew up in the middle of all of this. Ever since I was a child, illegal immigration has been an issue. So I'm glad to see this as a national story at the forefront right now. Yes, absolutely. But it's got to be smart border control. It can't just be money being thrown. Look at the Rio Grande Valley. Look at the money that even John Cornyn has said that a lot of this, the Republican from Texas has said that this is a dangerous step that President Trump is taking right now.
To all three of you, thank you and stand by. Here we go, the Rose Garden and the president.
Thank you very much, everybody. Before we begin, I'd like to just say that we have a large team of very talented people in China. We've had a negotiation going on for about 2 days. It's going extremely well. Who knows what that means, because it only matters if we get it done, but we're very much working very closely with China and President Xi, who I respect a lot. Very good relationship that we have. And we're a lot closer than we ever were in this country with having a real trade deal. We're covering everything, all of the points that people have been talking about for years that said couldn't be done, whether it was theft or anything. The unfairness. We've been losing, on average, $375 billion a year with China. A lot of people think it's $506 billion. Some people think it's much more than that. We're going to be leveling the playing field. The tariffs are hurting China very badly. They don't want them, and frankly, if we can make the deal, it'd be my honor to remove them. But otherwise, we're having many billions of dollars pouring into our treasury. We've never had that before with China. It's been very much of a one-way street. So that's happening, and the relationship with China is very good. But I think they finally respect our country. They haven't respected us for a long time. Not for a long time. The UK and the US, as you probably have been seeing and hearing, we're agreeing to go forward and preserve our trade agreement. You know all of the situation with respect to Brexit and the complexity and the problems, but we have a very good trading relationship with UK, and that's just been strengthened further. So with the UK, we're continuing our trade, and we are going to actually be increasing it very substantially as time goes by. We expect that the UK will be very, very substantially increased as it relates to trade with the United States. The relationship there also is very good. We have a lot of great announcements having to do with Syria and our success with the eradication of the caliphate, and that'll be announced over the next 24 hours, and many other things. A lot of positive things are going on. We're working on a summit, and you know all about the summit. It'll be in Vietnam, Hanoi, and we'll be meeting in Hanoi. I think a lot of you will be going, I suspect, and I hope we have the same good luck as we had in the first summit. A lot was done in the first summit. No more rockets going up, no more missiles going up, no more testing of nuclear. Get back our remains, the remains of our great heroes from the Korean War. And we got back our hostages. But we hope we're going to be very much equally as successful. I'm in no rush for speed. We just don't want testing. The sanctions, as you know, remain. Everything is remaining. China's been helping us, and Russia's been helping us. And South Korea, I think you can say, has been, we've been working very closely with South Korea, with Japan. But China, Russia on the border have really been at least partially living up to what they're supposed to be doing, and that's okay, as per the United Nations. So we will have a meeting on the 27th and 28th of February, and I think that will be a very successful one. I look forward to seeing Chairman Kim. We have also established a very good relationship, which has never happened between him or his family and the United States. They have really taken advantage of the United States. Billions of dollars has been paid to them. And we won't let that happen, but we think that North Korea and Chairman Kim have a tremendous potential as an economic force, economic power. Their location between South Korea and then Russia and China, right smack in the middle, is phenomenal. And we think they have a great chance for tremendous economic prosperity in the future. So I look forward to seeing Chairman Kim in Vietnam. Today I'm announcing several critical actions that my administration is taking to confront a problem that we have right here at home. We fight wars that are 6,000 miles away, wars that we should have never been in many cases, but we don't control our own border. So we're going to confront the national security crisis on our southern border, and we're going to do it one way or the other. We have to do it. Not because it was a campaign promise, which it is. It was one of many, by the way, not my only one. We're rebuilding the military. Our economy is thriving like never before. You look at other economies. They're doing terribly, and we're doing phenomenally. The market is up tremendously today. Not that that's anything, but, you know, because I'll go back in and they'll say, oh, the market just went down. But the market is getting close to the new highs that we created. We have all the records. We have every record, but we're getting close to that point again where we'll create new records. So our country is doing very well economically, and we've done a lot. But one of the things I said I have to do and I want to do is border security, because we have tremendous amounts of drugs flowing into our country, much of it coming from the southern border. When you look and when you listen to politicians, in particular certain Democrats, they say it all comes through the port of entry. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's just a lie. It's all a lie. They say walls don't work. Walls work 100%. Whether it's El Paso, I really was smiling because the other night I was in El Paso. We had a tremendous crowd. And tremendous crowd. And I asked the people, many of whom were from El Paso, but they came from all over Texas. And I asked them, I said, let me ask you, as a crowd, when the wall went up, was it better? You were there, some of you. It was not only better, it was like 100% better. You know what they did. But that's only one example. There are so many examples. In El Paso, they have close to 2,000 murders right on the other side of the wall. And they had 23 murders. It's a lot of murders. But it's not close to 2,000 murders, right on the other side of the wall in Mexico. So everyone knows that walls work. And there are better examples than El Paso, frankly. You just take a look almost everywhere. Take a look at Israel. They're building another wall. Their wall is 99.9% effective, they told me. 99.9%. That's what it would be with us, too. The only weakness is they go to a wall and then they go around the wall. They go around the wall and in. Okay? That's what it is. Very simple. And a big majority of the big drugs, the big drug loads, don't go through ports of entry. They can't go through ports of entry. You can't take big loads because you have people. We have some very capable people, the Border Patrol, law enforcement looking. You can't take human traffic, women and girls. You can't take them through ports of entry. You can't have them tied up in the back seat of a car or a truck or a van. They open the door. They look. They can't see 3 women with tape in their mouth or 3 women whose hands are tied. They go through areas where you have no wall. Everybody knows that. Nancy knows it. Chuck knows it. They all know it. It's all a big lie. It's a big con game. You don't have to be very smart to know. You put up a barrier, the people come in, and that's it. They can't do anything unless they walk left or right and they find an area where there's no barrier and they come into the United States. Welcome. We've detained more people. Our border agents are doing such incredible work. Our military has been incredible. We put up barbed wire on top of certain old walls that were there. We fixed the wall and we loaded up with barbed wire. It's very successful. But our military has been fantastic, and I want to thank them. And it's very necessary. We've broken up 2 caravans that are on their way. They just are breaking. They're in the process of breaking up. We have another one that we haven't been able to break up yet. We've been actually working with Mexico much better than ever before. I want to thank the president. I want to thank Mexico. They have their own problems. They have the largest number of murders that they've ever had in their history. Almost 40,000 murders. 40,000. And they got to straighten that out, and I think they will. But I just want to thank the president because he's been helping us with these monstrous caravans that have been coming up. We had one that was up to over 15,000 people. It's largely broken up. Others have gotten through. And in Tijuana, you have a lot of people staying there. If we didn't have the wall up and if we didn't have the wall secured and strengthened, they would have walked right through. They'd be welcome to the United States. One of the things we'd save just a tremendous amount on would be sending the military. If we had a wall, we don't need the military because we'd have a wall. So I'm going to be signing a national emergency. And it's been signed many times before. It's been signed by other presidents. From 1977 or so, it gave the presidents the power. There's rarely been a problem. They sign it. Nobody cares. I guess they weren't very exciting. But nobody cares. They sign it for far less important things in some cases, in many cases. We're talking about an invasion of our country with drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs. We have some of the greatest people I know. They've been with me from the beginning of my campaign, almost from the first week, the angel moms. Unfortunately, we have new angel moms. One incredible woman just showed me her daughter, who we're talking about, killed in the year of 18. I said, I haven't seen you before. She said, no, I'm new. I said, that's too bad. It's too bad. It's so sad. Stand up just for a second. Show how beautiful your girl was. Thank you. I have such respect for these people. Angel moms, angel dads, angel families. I have great respect for these people. These are great people. These are great people. They're fighting for